Welcome to your weekend. News Radio 600 Kogo and a very special edition of San Diego Business Weekend. I'm Sully, your host. Yeah, you're used to listening to Aubrey Morrow here, but I'm socially distancing Aubrey Morrow for the day and giving him a day off. He does such a great job here, but we're going to take over this morning because we've got a couple of great, we got several great guests. I've got Mayor Faulconer is going to be joining us here this hour to talk about what's going on in the city. Also, Mike Hess with Mike Hess Brewing to talk about the effect of the coronavirus on San Diego business, as well as County Supervisor Kristin Gaspar will be in studio with us today. Welcome to your weekend. San Diego Business Weekend's on the air. Now, the reason this is going to be an interesting one today is because also in an unprecedented move, I'm going to open the phone lines today in the second hour. So, yeah, we're going to be on for 2 hours today until 10 o'clock this morning on News Radio 600 Kogo. And if you have any questions at all for me, because I've got so many unanswered emails from our Kogo audience and our KUSI audience, that I thought I'd give the opportunity just to open up the phone lines and give you guys a chance to give me a call. And you can ask me about stocks. You can ask me about your 401k. You can ask me about the stimulus package. You can ask me what I think about the economy, about the stock market, is anything. The same stuff you email me about. We're going to open up those phone lines coming up at 9 o'clock, and you can do that for me. In the meantime, though, I want to talk a little bit about what's going on. Look, one of the most notable stories I talked about this week on News Radio 600 Kogo with Ted and LaDonna was the fact that we're seeing an economy here that is being pushed into a forced recession in order to flatten the curve. And we've heard the flatten the curve is flatten the infection curve. We have to keep each other away from each other. Okay, so we have to keep 6 feet away. We can't be walking into restaurants and concerts and stuff. What's that going to do? That's going to affect portions of this economy. Number one, we're not spending money. And what do I always tell you? 70% of this economy is based upon consumer spending. The other piece of this is that the lower third of this economy has been the most affected by this economy under this president. But let's keep in mind who is within that lower third. It is the waiters, waitresses, bartenders, ticket takers, the people that are sweeping the aisles at the movie theaters, all of the face-forward consumer tourism and entertainment and restaurant business workers are really struggling right now. And that's going to cause potentially a retraction in this economy that was doing so well prior to this virus. And that's one of the things I want to point out. Keep in mind, the number of Americans who applied for unemployment benefits in early March was at a 50-year low until we got some numbers this week that jumped a bit for obvious reasons. The wholesale cost of goods and services posted its biggest decline in 5 years, meaning that wholesale inflation sunk in February again. Oil prices were historically low, 17-year lows. Jobless claims dipped. It was just an interesting week to see. Look, amid all of these bullets whizzing overhead with respect to, of course, I'm being analogous, with respect to the coronavirus, the underlying economy, as the stock market is tanking, underlying economy was so very strong going into this. Now, we can't expect this not to affect the GDP. We're going to see at least 1 quarter of negative growth. If you have 2 quarters of negative growth, that is indeed a recession. But there's a chorus of analysts and a chorus of economists that say, as fast as we had to go into this recession, we will bounce back. And as you hear me say quite a bit, the market runs on 2 emotions, fear and greed. And the pendulum has swung so far into the fear panic mode that you realize any little bit of good news, and we witnessed this today on this week on Wall Street, any little bit of good news moves the pendulum into the direction of exuberance. So where you see these swings where we're up 5% one day, we're down 6% the next day, we're up 5%, and you're going to see the same thing happen. Can you imagine? I mean, I know you're stir crazy. I know I'm stir crazy. The minute they say it's okay for us to go out to a restaurant, do you think you'll be able to get a reservation? Do you think you're not going to? I mean, I'm going to tell you, people are chomping at the bit to get out of their houses anyway. And you have to understand, those are open air indicators for consumer spending. The other thing that I want to bring up here before I get to our first guest is that you really do have to ask yourself, is that cup of Starbucks any less valuable, or are you any less desirous of that cup of Starbucks than you were 3 weeks ago? No. And Starbucks might be depressed in their stock price, but you're still wanting Starbucks. Apple might be closed for the safety of their employees and the safety of their customers, but don't you still love your iPhone or your Mac? I mean, honestly, we have to remember the underlying tenets of this economy are still in place. I think the other thing we have to think about, though, is that this is going to change us, much like 9/11 changed us. And what I mean by that is we never traveled the same way again. We never, ever approached going into the airport the same way. All of us automatically had to add an hour and a half to our lives in traveling, but that's just the norm now. I think in the same way, and I'm not just talking about us carrying around bottles of hand sanitizer and people, not being afraid to run out of toilet paper during the grocery apocalypse. What I'm talking about is this will change the way we probably manufacture. We probably will not be as dependent on other countries for manufacturing, say, our antibiotics. We probably won't be as dependent on other countries as we are China specifically. And maybe we'll get some legislation that puts some money behind biopharma to keep some of that stuff in the States here and so on and so forth. But I honestly think that's what's going to happen. A very interesting week on Wall Street. Market behavior a century ago, by the way, suggests the worst could be over for stocks, if not for the coronavirus pandemic. But man, if you start looking at charts back and forth, your head's going to explode like mine is. So I think what we do is let's go to the experts. We're going to talk to Kristin Gaspar, County Supervisor. Is going to be in studio in just a second here. And then I'm going to have Mike Hess from Hess Brewing. Mike Hess, of course, had to close down his tasting rooms across the county. They were seeing record growth, had to lay off most of his employees, but he's going to talk to us about what it's like to be a small businessman in San Diego. Then, of course, Mayor Kevin Faulconer to talk to us about what's going on in the community, what has gone on in the last week. And then I'm going to open up the phone lines to you, so get your questions ready. And I'll answer to the best of my ability anything that you have to ask me regarding the economy, stocks, your life, your money. All right. News Radio 600 Kogo, San Diego Business Weekend, special edition, 2 hours on the air. To see you all on the move, yeah. News Radio 600 Kogo, welcome to your weekend. Now that I've calmed you down sufficiently, keep in mind, special broadcast today of San Diego Business Weekend. So I'll be taking your calls starting at 9 o'clock. Anything you want to ask me about, you've been emailing me for the last couple of weeks. I'm happy to answer your emails, and I'm happy to try to give you as much wisdom as I can give you. But I'm going to open up the phone lines here in the next hour and just let you guys ask questions about the economy, your 401k, stocks, where my band might be playing next, any inside information you want about Little Tommy or Rusty Nails on our new show on KUSI. I'm very excited to have Kristin Gaspar in studio. Kristin Gaspar, of course, County Supervisor, has been a mainstay in San Diego County in moving the needle for many, many years. And you were one of the first ones. First of all, welcome. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
So, by the way, if you're listening to us on the radio, what you don't know is that we also tape this show for television. So right after the show, you can go to kogo.com, keyword Sully, and me and producer Lady Mary will put up the TV version. So as you're driving around Southern California from San Diego to Santa Barbara, you can certainly listen. But if you want to watch and you can see some of the things that Kristin will be referring to, or that the mayor coming up or Mike Hess will come up, you can actually watch it on the air. But boy, interesting times here.
Wow, that's an understatement of the century.
Boy, when you got into office, do you remember what the biggest challenge was right away here? Because it certainly wasn't was it housing? Was it homelessness? Was it?
No, none of those issues were even on the radar. In fact, I remember talking to my political consultant at the time, and I said, here are the things I want to focus on. I want to focus on our roads. I want to focus on homelessness. I want to focus on addiction. And he looked at me and said, do you have anything else?
Wow.
And, we've come full circle.
Which, by the way, are the things that we should be looking at
It's all we're talking about anymore. So it's hard to even remember what life was like yesterday. It wasn't lost on me how excited I was to get to CVS yesterday and be there at the time of a paper delivery.
Right.
I mean, this was major. Right. And then I was able to ration buy a roll of paper towels, and that was a really big deal. And I left so happy. My times have changed.
Isn't it interesting? So I was saying in the first segment, one thing that we all have to remember is the stock market's not the economy. And of course, we're seeing gyrations there. The other piece of this thing, too, is our iPhone any less valuable than it was 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago?
I'm ready to throw it out the window, actually.
Well,
you start living in this bubble.
Yeah.
And you start getting a little angry. I'll have to admit this myself on Facebook, because overnight, can we at least admit that every American became a physician?
Oh,
and
my goodness.
every friend you have is now a doctor.
Yes.
And they have all sorts of studies. Right?
Right. No, it's exactly right.
Or let's talk about all the model parents out there. That also makes me mad. They have these beautiful days that they've laid out in their homes, a chalkboard of daily activities. Let me be the first to admit that's not the way it's going in my home, but you almost feel like shamed. You can't say anything. So I'm going to be real with you and say, look, this is hard.
Yeah.
Overnight, parents became teachers.
Yeah.
And you already knew the challenges of being a parent, but now we're in charge of their curriculum too. And, my kids aren't little angels all day. And so I hope that other people are out there can relate to this. But it's a real challenge. And you just think of, you wake up one day and things are dramatically different. And you know how much work it's going to take to rebuild it. Right. So while we navigate this crisis, my full focus is that forward frame. How do we dig our way out?
Right.
As soon as the medical crisis ends, how do we recover? And as a business owner, I'm kind of in a unique position too, understanding the challenges ahead.
Well, and I've said this all the time about you, because I've been a fan for a long time, because I said the only time you get perspective really is when you sign the front of a paycheck.
That's right.
Listen, I signed the back of a paycheck for many years, and then I became an entrepreneur in my 20s. But when you start signing the front of the paycheck, you can really understand what the challenges are of small business. I'm going to have Mike Hess come up here after you today here on San Diego Business Weekend. And one of the reasons is because he had to he had to lay off a huge percent of his workforce. And we're going into a forced recession to flatten this curve. How do you think businesses, or how can businesses recover? And by the way, the reason we talk about businesses here, because if you don't have businesses, you don't have employees. If you don't have employees, you don't have spending. If you don't have spending, we don't have an economy.
Well, sometimes people think of business and they think profit. There's evil business owners that are out there. I can tell you through my own personal experience growing a business here in San Diego, we think about our people. Sure. We have 150 people that depend on us every day to make smart decisions. There are 150 people, but behind that, there are hundreds of people that rely on my business alone to recover from all of this. So we have to stay focused on the people, because what keeps us up at night is being able to keep our doors open for our employees. What are they going to do? It's really important as business owners that we focus right now on the policies that are emerging. I've been looking into the policies coming out of Congress, coming out of the Senate. One thing that our employers need to be aware of is that we are going to be covering a lot of things that typically our state would be covering. For example, paid family leave. That's going to be the employer's responsibility for that family leave. Employers are also going to be responsible for covering sick time for non-full-time employees. That's a big change. We're also going to be responsible for covering the sick time for our full-time employees.
I'm watching percentages. So as a business owner myself in San Diego for many years, folks, you have to remember that back in the 70s and 80s, we saw 12% profit margins. That was an average profit margin across the country. Today's profit margins, if you are very successful, you're in the 5 to 6s, but most of us are in the 3s, 2s. That's your profit margin. If by the stroke of a pen, you raise the minimum wage by 7%, or if by the stroke of a pen, you add some of these things you're describing, you've got 3 options. You go out of business, you fire people, or you raise your prices. In every case, that's like cutting off the top of the blanket and sewing it onto the bottom of the blanket.
Well, and that's why it's important for our community to understand this, because they have to come together and help our business community rebuild. Anytime I've faced a challenge in my business, it hasn't been me as the genius with my husband figuring it all out. It's our employees coming together, because they know that we look out for them. They're going to look out for us too. So we are going to have a lot of work to do. If you think for a minute that we're going to end up even at where we were before this crisis, you're fooling yourself, because the government can't come up with all this relief. Did anyone recognize we didn't have money to pay for things before? We couldn't even fill the potholes outside that we had littering downtown San Diego.
Now we've just piled on. I want to change, by the way, Kristin Gaspar, 3rd District Supervisor here in the county, on the air with us. By the way, you can always go to her website, which is supervisorkristingaspar.com. And actually, I visit there quite a bit because I live in North County. I'm right in your district.
Stalker.
And I've on the picture on your website. It doesn't look like a hill, but that's a nasty little hill to ride up your bike when you're coming home from a 70-mile ride right there.
Yeah, it is. Bike to work isn't easy for me.
I can actually see my house there. Okay. There was a press conference the other day with Nathan Fletcher and some, and I'm going to say quote unquote, health professionals, because I can't remember who they were. I'm not suggesting they weren't. I'm just saying, notably, you weren't there, nor were other supervisors there. And I just was scratching my head. Did you even know all of this was coming out, number one? And was this a concerted effort as a group to tell the city of San Diego what was going on?
Thank you for asking this question,
Well,
because I keep hearing, where are you? I want people to understand that our laws on the books are keeping me out, literally keeping me out.
Talk about
So we have the Brown Act. The Brown Act prevents a quorum of more than 2, because we're a 5-member board, from coming together and making decisions. Now, the board declared an emergency declaration, or we had an emergency declaration back in February.
Right.
When that happened, the board decided to form a subcommittee. Now, we work with subcommittees all the time. Subcommittees dive deeper into issues. They come back to the board with further recommendations on potential board action. So we formed a subcommittee. It was built of our chairman, Greg Cox. It was also built of Supervisor Fletcher, and the justification was he's very close with the governor, so it made a lot of sense at the time. What doesn't make sense now is what's transpired. That subcommittee is literally calling the shots with our medical team behind the scenes.
Well, which bothers me because we're
it bothers
not,
me too.
Well, we're not, as voters, we're not getting our representation.
There are three
one.
supervisors, you need to be aware, are not at the table. It's not just me. It's Supervisor Desmond, Supervisor Jacob. We each represent 650,000 people in our districts, times 3. But we are not part of this decision making. So I have gone back and I said, put me in, coach. I have a lot to offer here. Number one, as a parent, as a business owner, I have a lot to offer, but so do the other supervisors. Supervisor Jacob has been there for decades. She also is very close with senior issues. She is valuable.
There when you say is there resistance coming?
So the resistance now is a pushback from me and the other supervisors saying, look, we get the Brown Act. We're not trying to act in a way that's not transparent with the public.
But at least use all our assets here.
Does the public understand 3 of 5 representatives are carved out? When they get this advice from the medical professionals, there absolutely are decisions that have to be made. I have not been privy to any of this information. Therefore, when emergency declarations are made as they create more orders going out in our community, I'm completely in the dark. I was sitting at Phil's barbecue eating French fries, watching the press conference, wondering.
You could, by the way. I want to mention why you could still go to Phil's.
So good. Well, you could. It was the last day. And in fact, I informed the server at Phil's that this was their last table. It's just remarkable to me. I should not be carved out. The Brown Act at this point in time is carving us out. And I say we just push back because the community would rather have us all there. They'd rather have all their representatives.
And you're exactly right. And I have to say that the community does want you there. And
and I want to be there.
You're my supervisor, and I'll make as much noise as I can. Kristin, I want to have you on as many times as we can because you really are doing a great job in North County. And once again, I want you guys to visit her website, SupervisorKristinGaspar.com here, talking about business in San Diego as it relates to the coronavirus and how we're going to get through it. I'm going to have you back next week.
Thank you.
You got to kind of give us the play-by-play.
Daily update.
All right, coming up, Mike Hess from Mike Hess Brewing is going to join us. He's obviously a friend of the program. And later on the program, Mayor Kevin Faulconer. Don't forget, second hour, open phones. I'll answer anything you got. News Radio 600 Kogo. Welcome to your weekend. Thanks again to Kristin Gaspar for joining us. And I want to get right to Mike Hess from Mike Hess Brewing. Mike Hess is a good friend of mine. I met through Big Biz Show. We started broadcasting our national TV show with Rusty Nails. Actually, it was Biz Brew at his location on Grimm Avenue. We played his Hess Fest. He's a great San Diegan. He's also a captain of industry here and one of the many craft brewers here in San Diego, and of course has been a frequent guest on my shows here in San Diego as well as all over. You've seen him a number of times. Mike, thanks so much for swinging by, pal. I know this is a rough time for you, but I'm going to let you take it away and kind of talk about, where we were just 3 weeks ago, and you guys are introducing new beer and building a new location in Imperial Beach, and now here we are now.
Yeah, it's been quite the pivot for sure. I mean, we were on pace for our best year yet. We were looking at almost 50% growth through the end of February, and of course that's all been derailed now by what's going on.
So with respect to a forced recession, of course, the reason we're going through all of this is because we need to flatten this curve like we've talked about. And flattening the curve means we got to stay away from each other. And staying away from each other means no large gatherings. No large gatherings obviously means concerts, athletic events, and restaurants and breweries go into there as well as bars. You know, I know it's got to be a bitter pill for you because maybe you do, maybe you don't. I'm going to ask you. You sort of have to understand the philosophy, but it doesn't make it any easier when you got to lay off 80% of your workforce. Correct?
No, yeah, no. I mean, I know we're doing the right thing, and actually, you know, to be honest, my crew, you know, we let the vast majority of them go on Monday, and we're losing a few people this week. They've all been super understanding. They've all been, you know, they all get it. We basically said, look, we're going to get through this on the other side. We're doing everything we can do right now to make sure that there is Mike Hess Brewing when we get out on the other side. And when we do, we're bringing you guys all back. I mean, this is a great team, and we love you guys. And they all have been just, you know, they're on board with it. You know, nobody's happy about it, but everybody's on board with doing their share. Well,
if we think in terms of economic impact of craft beer in this county, I've talked about this a number of times, and I've said this before, it's the equivalent of having a Super Bowl come to San Diego every single year with respect to economic impact. Mm-hmm. I've also talked about the fact that we had this industry that was the fishing industry that was taken over by aerospace back in the late 60s, early 70s. And then somewhere along the line, craft beer took over as one of the biggest market drivers in San Diego. Talk about, as a group, was this something that you had expected? As you know, because when you got in early, before there were 160 or something like that there in town. Talk about that a little bit right now.
Right.
Talk about what you expected the economic impact to be when you first got in here.
Oh my gosh, it was not even. We weren't even thinking in these numbers. Nobody was. We opened up. We were 33rd brewery in San Diego when we opened up in 2010, and even in 2010, I thought there's already a lot of breweries here at 32 breweries when we opened up and became the 33rd. And now there's 160 just in San Diego. There are more than 1,000 in the state of California alone. The growth has been phenomenal. We employ a ton of people, as you know. We pay a lot of taxes. We provide great jobs, and of course, now what we're seeing is really just devastation across our industry, hospitality in general. The layoffs have been swift, and the numbers have been huge.
I don't want to be the one to even ask this, but I have to ask this: will there be some breweries that don't survive, or do you think the stimulus and the trajectory of how you're being treated through city, state, and national is going to be enough to keep everyone alive, or do you think there's going to be some fringe breweries that we're not going to have anymore?
I think that the fallout is going to be pretty tremendous, not just in breweries. And the reason I say that is a lot of breweries that have come in, especially lately, are in the retail game only. They're selling their beer across the counter by the pint. That's how we started out in 2010. Thankfully, we package, and so we've got beer going out in the shelves. Even still, we're fulfilling shelves orders out at Vons and Costco and Sprouts and places, Trader Joe's, things like that. But the breweries that are focused on retail only, they're going to have a very, very difficult time to make it through. The economic packages that we've seen so far, outside of loans to borrow more money, and most of the small brewery owners are already leveraged, aren't very helpful. The only thing that they're helpful for are the employees who have been furloughed or let go.
Mike, what would be helpful to you? Mike Hess, by the way, on the phone, Chief Brewing Officer of Mike Hess Brewing here in San Diego. What would be helpful to you in your opinion? Is there an answer, or is it just one of those throw your hands up and do the best we can sort of arrangements?
For right now, I think that there's not been any real movement in helping breweries with rent or fixed cost release. So I personally, we've been negotiating on behalf of the 6 leases that we hold with our landlords. We've talked to our bank, and our bank, we've got a small local bank. They've been very gracious in helping us by just letting us go interest only on our debt. But there's been no formal program for helping breweries. And obviously, we're not the airline industry. We're not going to get the bailout money, but any sort of relief that would help breweries to get through to however long this is going to be before we can let people back into our stores and get back to business would be helpful.
Mike, my question for you is, if, let's say, God willing, this entire disaster, crisis, whatever you want to call it, were to end today, how many days and how many people would be reemployed to where you were at full capacity? Would it take long for you guys to ramp back up?
Oh, no. I mean, we're still making beer, like as I mentioned, because we're packaging. So I've let go about 40% of my production crew. I've let go of almost 100% of our retail crew. And those folks are all, on the unemployment programs out there for them. But if we were able to turn the lights back on tomorrow, we would have everybody back on tomorrow. And I think that the bounce from this is going to be tremendous. I think that people are going to come out and go out to those breweries because we see the talk and the chatter on the message boards.
I
people want to get out and go do things.
Yeah, Mike, thank you so much for your time. Mike Hess Brewing on Grimm Avenue in North Park. If you haven't visited it, when you're able to, please do that. Chances are you're going to see me there. We'll be playing Hess Fest this year again. And his new IB tasting room along with all the other ones across San Diego. Great guy, great company, Mike Hess. Coming up, Mayor Kevin Faulconer, San Diego Business Weekend. News Radio 600 Coastal. I felt like News Radio 600 Kogo, welcome to your weekend. Sully here on a very special San Diego Business Weekend where I'll be opening up the phone lines in just a few minutes to take all of your calls and comments. 800-600-KOGO, 800-600-KOGO. You got questions about your stock, you got questions about the 401k, what's going on in the economy, everything else. All the emails I get, we decided to do a special broadcast here on News Radio 600 KOGO to try to at least allay some wisdom, if not calm some of the fears, and let you literally have at it and ask me anything you want with respect to the market. I'm going to have Kristin Gaspar for a few minutes in the next break just to give us an overview on the market itself, since it's been such a crazy ride. But one person here in San Diego that has made a huge difference in calming the fears of not only the folks that have been sequestered or laid off work, but also the business owners like myself and many of you, and also tackling the county health issue with this coronavirus. I bring you the Honorable Mayor Faulconer, Mayor Kevin Faulconer, joining us here on San Diego Business Weekend on News Radio 600 KOGO. Mayor Faulconer, it's been a busy week for you.
Busy week, but Sully, I think you just hit the nail on the head when you talked about how San Diegans are really coming together. This has been difficult times and really trying to set that tone of we're going to get through this. We have from other emergencies throughout our history. This is unlike something we've never seen before. But at the same time, it's been incredibly important to me as mayor to really act in a calm, deliberate manner on all the things we need to be doing to protect our health, and then increasingly the steps that we need to do to protect individuals and our small business communities to really help weather this storm.
Well, I have to ask you, and I couldn't agree more, and my hat's off to you and the rest of your staff for being so face forward with us with so many updates, along with Chief Dave Nislett and along with the county supervisors and such. I just had Kristin Gaspar on here earlier today to talk about really what's going on in the city. Let's talk about the decision to close restaurants and bars. Obviously, at the time, people were scratching their head as patrons, but it turned out to be a really good decision. How hard was that to make? And at the end of the day, did you get any pushback from local vendors and local restaurants?
Now, all of I can't say enough about our bars and restaurants, so they've all jumped in and complied. Why? Because it's the right thing to do. To really help beat this, flatten that curve, as we've talked so much about, we have to have people keep that distance. That 6 foot is real. And so while it's a difficult decision, it was one that we made quickly because we're doing it with all of the advice and direction of our public health officials. Again, with one goal: how do we slow and ultimately stop the spread of this virus and do everything we can? Not an easy decision to make. We know the impact, Sully, that it's going to have on our small businesses. It's one of the reasons why I moved so quickly, particularly on some of the economic packages. But again, I can't say enough about our bars and our restaurants. I see so many restaurants that are doing things differently to try to get out there with the to-go orders that maybe they hadn't done it before. And San Diegans are responding, and I think that's what's so important because they want to support these businesses. They know the jobs that are at stake. They know the layoffs that are happening. And again, it is a difficult but necessary decision, as we just simply have to do everything we can to help slow this down immediately.
Mayor Kevin Faulconer on the phone with us on News Radio 600 Kogo. One of the things you did face forward, and again, I want to applaud you for this, is I don't think people really understand that by declaring a state of emergency, it allows the city to seek out state and federal funding to help deal with the impact of COVID-19, meaning that we can have some of these economic measures that you've put forth. Talk about that, because that was very soon, and it was really smart to do.
Well, I mean, I'm looking short-term and long-term, and long-term from a reimbursement standpoint. Look, we are redirecting resources on a daily basis, making significant changes, standing things up. We're going to be eligible for reimbursement for both the state and the federal. We're looking at FEMA, as a matter of fact, this morning. And so all of that comes into play because I want to ensure that we are positioned not only to act immediately, those emergency authority gives me that ability, and to keep an eye on the long term on our budget to make sure we're going to get those reimbursements. Council authorized that emergency a couple of days after. Can't say enough about my colleagues. And, this is not a time for Democrat, Republican. This is a time for we're all in this together as a city. And that's why we're going to continue to move fast. We're going to continue to move deliberate. And we're also going to take those steps that I think is incredibly important for our small businesses and individuals that are out there that are in need. And why I move so quickly on no water shutoffs for folks, so they don't have to worry about that. The eviction ordinance that we moved quickly on in terms of folks that are going to feel the effects from COVID-19 or any medical bills or other expenses. The fund that we announced this week for small businesses, seeded with $4 million. We got a lot of corporate folks that are going to come help as well. We need to make sure that as we get through this, and we will get through this, we don't know how long it's going to take, but we're doing everything we can to protect our small business infrastructure so that when we do get on the other side, we have businesses that are ready to go.
Well, it's interesting because moving and acting quickly is crucial in a time like this, and the city of San Diego acted very swiftly to help those in need, and of course, this is unprecedented, as you mentioned. One of the things I was getting a lot of email about, and it was perfect timing, because people were emailing me about, what about if I can't pay my rent? Do the landlords know that we need help? And almost to the minute, you came out with the declaration suspending evictions and so on and so forth. I want you to get into that because I want to make it very clear that you understand and we understand that the courts are closed. It's not about new eviction notices. This is about literally executing evictions that were about to happen in the days to come. That was really brilliant. Talk about that, because I don't want that to be confused at all.
It is, but we need, and we're taking extraordinary actions, things that we would normally never do. Why? Because we need people to stay safe. We need them to stay in their homes. We need them to stay in their apartments. This is not a time to change that dynamic. There'll be plenty of time on the back end as we sort through, all of the economic consequences. But for right now, in this emergency, this is a public health emergency. And so everything that we are doing is geared towards one thing. How do we keep people safe? How do we allow that social distance? And how are we doing everything we can to get through this? And so I can't say enough again about the landlord community, our business community. This is extraordinary times, but we get through this by when we all work together. And that's why I really wanted to act quickly on this. And it's nothing else, Sully, also in the reality, but to give folks that peace of mind that, you're going through enough already with schools being shut down, kids are at home. I want to take away as much as we can of some of that economic short-term uncertainty in terms of water, in terms of electric, and in terms of not worrying about getting kicked out.
Mayor Faulconer has been so generous with his time here this morning on San Diego Business Weekend, and he's been on the air with me, countless times, and I always give him the same opportunity every time we end an interview. Anything you want to say to the city of San Diego, Mayor Faulconer, that would calm the fears?
I want to give a big thank you to everybody because San Diegans are really rising to the occasion. I've talked a lot about the volunteer spirit. In fact, I'm just about to go give some blood here at the American Red Cross. People that are helping out with the food bank. It just shows the best of our city. This is difficult. We're going to get through this, and we're going to do it as San Diegans because that's what we do. So I appreciate you continuing to give all the information out there. We're going to keep pushing. And really my closing thought here is let's take care of each other. Let's take care of our neighbors. We are going to get through this.
Very good. Mayor Kevin Faulconer, thank you so much for joining us on San Diego Business Weekend and on News Radio 600 Kogo. And that's exactly right. Getting the information out and acting in a swift manner is how we're going to all get through this. And of course, look, it doesn't matter what end of the political spectrum you're on or what end of the economic spectrum you're on. This is a story, and in my 27 years in media, I know Cliff Albert, who's been, add another 25 years to that in media. In our experience, we've never seen a story that has affected every single person like this one is. And personally, it's hats off to the city council, hats off to the mayor for acting so swiftly, hats off to the mayors of individual cities across the county, and of course the county supervisors, like you heard from Kristin Gaspar today, for taking such swift measures because they're working hard, they're working diligent, and they're making sure that they're creating proper policies to address some of the anxiety that's coming out. And speaking of anxiety, I want to address some anxiety for you. I'm going to open up the phone lines here on News Radio 600 Kogo for the first time in a long time, especially for me here in the Kogo studios. But I'm going to give you an opportunity to literally ask me anything you want regarding the economy, finances, the stimulus package, your 401k, your stocks, almost like we used to do when we first got into this game 25 years ago or something, when I first started on the original Big Biz show here on Kogo. So why don't we do that right now? I want to invite you to do a couple of things, by the way, because you can find me here every morning on the San Diego Morning News. You can find me on Good Morning San Diego on KUSI, and of course, our nationally syndicated television and radio program and 110 million broadcast TV homes every day, as well as 150 radio stations. The Big Biz Show, bigbizshow.com. Don't forget our new show, On the Air with Sully, Little Tommy, and Rusty Nails, airing tonight at 5 on KUSI. But I'm going to give you guys the opportunity to load up the phones. 800-600-KOGO, 800-600-KOGO. Your questions are next. We'll take a quick visit with Kristin Gaspar to talk about the market a bit, but then I'm going to answer your questions on the stock market, the economy. Anything you're concerned about with respect to money, I'm here for you. Welcome to a special edition of San Diego Business Weekend. Welcome to your weekend, News Radio 600 Kogo.